She was 28 years old, working behind a counter, serving coffee to people who didn't see her. Elena Torres had a communications degree gathering dust in a closet and student loan payments that ate half her paycheck every month. She worked at a chain coffee shop where they called her by the wrong name for 6 months before she corrected them. She lived in a studio apartment with a microwave that sparked when she used it and a window that faced a brick wall. She was drifting. Not failing exactly. Just drifting. Going nowhere slowly. Then her grandmother died. Rosa Torres had run a small diner in a dying Rust Belt town for 43 years. Rosa's Kitchen, it was called. A place with cracked vinyl booths, a neon sign that flickered, and cinnamon rolls that people drove an hour to taste. Rosa was 78 when she passed. She died in her sleep, in the apartment above the diner, with flowers still on her hands from the morning's baking. Elena inherited everything. The diner, the debt, the crumbling building, the weight of a legacy she never asked for. She took a bus to the town she'd left behind at 18. 5 hours of winding roads and gray skies. When she arrived, the diner looked smaller than she remembered. The paint was peeling. The sign was dim. The windows were streaked with years of neglect. Inside, the chairs were stacked on tables, covered in dust. The coffee machine was dead. The coolers were empty. And Rosa was gone. Elena sat at the counter where she'd eaten breakfast as a child. She put her head in her hands and cried. She didn't know how to run a business. She didn't know how to cook. She didn't know anything about anything that mattered. The bank was calling. The suppliers were demanding payment. Her grandmother's lawyer had kindly explained that the diner was worth less than what it owed. She could sell it, walk away, go back to her studio apartment and her microwave and her life of going nowhere. She almost did. Then she found the journals. They were hidden in the back of Rosa's closet, behind old coats and boxes of photographs. 43 leather-bound notebooks, one for every year she'd run the diner. Elena pulled them out, one by one, and started reading. And what she found changed everything. Her grandmother wasn't just baking rolls and serving coffee. At 5 a.m. every single morning for 43 years, Rosa Torres was doing something extraordinary. She was building a community, one sunrise at a time. The journals were filled with names. Hundreds of them. Truck drivers and night nurses, factory workers and lost souls. People who had nowhere else to go and no one else to see. November 3rd, 1988. 5:02 a.m. A truck driver named Frank came in. He had the look of a man who'd lost everything. I made him coffee and sat with him until 6:30. He didn't say much, but he came back the next week. And the week after. 2 years later, he brought his new wife to meet me. The 5 a.m. hour isn't about business. It's about people who need someone to witness their dawn. Elena read page after page, year after year. Rosa had sat with the dying and the grieving. She had listened to confessions and fears and dreams. She had kept a pot of coffee warm for anyone who needed it. No questions asked, no payment required. And somewhere in the middle of a journal from 1995, Elena found the secret. I wake at 5 a.m. because that's when the world is quiet. No distractions, no demands. Just me and the dough and the sunrise. The first hour is for the baking. The second hour is for the people. If you build the foundation before anyone else wakes up, you can hold anything they bring to you. This is the secret. The morning is sacred. Protect it. Use it. Give it away to those who need it. Elena closed the journal and looked at the dusty diner around her. She had a choice. She could sell the building, take the scraps, and disappear back into her quiet, aimless life. Or she could wake up at 5 a.m. and see what happened. She decided to try. Just once. Just to see. The first morning was a disaster. Her alarm screamed at 5 a.m., and she nearly threw her phone against the wall. She dragged herself downstairs to the diner kitchen, fumbled with the ancient coffee machine, and burned the first batch of rolls to charcoal. Nobody came. The diner stayed empty. She sat alone in the silence, watching the sun rise through the grimy windows, and felt like a fool. But she came back the next day, and the next, and the next. On the 7th morning, she made coffee that was actually drinkable. On the 10th, she figured out the recipe for Rosa's cinnamon rolls. On the 14th, the smell of fresh baking drifted out of the diner's open door, and someone followed it inside. His name was Miguel. He was 62 years old, a retired factory worker whose wife had died 6 months earlier. He wore a worn jacket and carried a photograph in his pocket. He sat at the counter and said, "I used to come here." Rosa always had coffee ready at 5 a.m. Made the world feel less lonely. Elena poured him a cup. She didn't charge him. He came back the next day, and the next. On the 21st day, a woman named Sarah walked in. She was a nurse finishing the night shift, exhausted and hollow-eyed. She said she used to stop at Rosa's kitchen after her shifts because it was the only place open where she could sit in silence. Elena made her a coffee and gave her a warm roll. Sarah came back the next morning, and the next, and the next. Slowly, almost without noticing it, Elena began to understand what her grandmother had known all along. The 5 a.m. hour wasn't about skill building or career advancement. It was about presence. It was about showing up. It was about being there for the people who needed someone to witness their dawn. Miguel told her about his wife's final days. Sarah told her about the patients she couldn't save. A young man named Jamie started coming. He was 19, homeless, sleeping in his car, studying for his community college classes in the corner booth because the diner was warm and safe. Elena made them all coffee. She made them all rolls. She learned their names and their stories and their grief. And somewhere along the way, she stopped feeling like a failure. She woke at 5 a.m. not because she had to, but because the morning had become hers. The quiet before the chaos. The time when she could breathe before the world demanded everything from her. She kept reading Rosa's journals. She found entries about the 5 a.m. hours that built the diner's reputation. The secret customers, Rosa called them. The ones who came before sunrise. The ones who carried the heaviest burdens and needed the gentlest welcome. February 14th, 2003. A woman came in with a black eye. She didn't order anything. She just sat there, shaking. I made her toast and honey. She cried. She didn't say a word. But she came back the next week. And the week after. She brought her daughter to meet me on a Sunday morning at 5 a.m. The little girl asked me, "Why is your diner so warm?" I told her it was the oven. But that was a lie. The warmth comes from the people who show up when the world is dark. Elena started writing her own journal. She wrote about Miguel's first laugh in months. She wrote about Sarah finding the courage to go back to school. She wrote about Jamie passing his math exam and bringing her the test results at 5 a.m. like it was a sacred offering. The diner began to change. The regulars helped her clean. They painted the walls. They fixed the flickering sign. The community she was feeding started feeding her back. The bank called again. Elena had missed 2 mortgage payments. They told her the property would be repossessed in 60 days. She didn't tell the regulars. She didn't want to burden them. She figured she'd figure something out, like she always had. But they noticed. Of course they noticed. Miguel noticed the worry in her eyes. Sarah noticed the collection letters piling up behind the counter. Jamie saw her checking her bank balance on her phone, her face pale and drawn. And then one morning, the morning of the 56th day, Elena unlocked the diner door at 5 a.m. and found them all waiting. Not just her regulars. Dozens of people. 47 of them, standing in the cold dawn, clutching envelopes and boxes and bags. She saw faces she recognized and faces she didn't. Miguel was at the front. His hands were shaking. He stepped forward and held out a thick envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it," he said. She did. Inside were checks and cash and folded bills. A total of $78,000. She looked up, stunned. Miguel said, "Your grandmother saved my life when I wanted to end it. She sat with me at 5 a.m. for a month and never asked me to explain. She just made sure I wasn't alone. Now it's our turn." Sarah stepped forward. "We've been meeting at 5 a.m. at the community center, Elena, for 2 weeks. We didn't tell you because we wanted it to be a surprise. Every single person here has a story about Rosa. She fed us. She listened to us. She held us up when we couldn't stand. We can't save Rosa, but we can save her kitchen." Jamie walked up with a rolled-up piece of paper. He spread it out on the counter. It was a drawing, a detailed plan for renovating the diner. He'd been sketching it in the corner booth for weeks. "I'm studying architecture now," he said shyly. "Well, I was. I dropped out. But I figure, if you keep the diner open, Maybe I can keep going to school. You gave me a place to study, Elena. Let me give you something back. Elena looked at all of them. The tired, the grieving, the hopeful, the broken, the healing. They were standing in her grandmother's diner at 5 a.m., the hour Rosa had called sacred, the hour she'd spent 43 years protecting. And she finally understood. The 5 a.m. secret wasn't about success. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about discipline. It was about becoming someone worth waking up for. She kept the diner. She paid off the debt. She renovated with Jamie's plans and Miguel's labor and Sarah's fundraising. The community that Rosa had built over 43 years had become a fortress around Elena. They lifted her up the way she had lifted them. On the one-year anniversary of Rosa's death, Elena went through the last journal. She was in her grandmother's apartment above the diner, watching the sun rise through the same window Rosa had watched for 43 years. And she found the final entry, dated just a week before Rosa died. If you're reading this, my sweet Elena, you made it to 5 a.m. I knew you would. I knew the journals would find you. I knew the regulars would find you. I knew you would find yourself. The diner was never the business. It was the family. The 5 a.m. hour isn't about working harder. It's about showing up for the people who need you. That's all I ever did. That's all anyone ever needs to do. Keep watching the sunrise with them, Elena. That's the real inheritance. Elena closed the journal. She looked at the diner below, where the first regulars were already arriving, tapping on the door, waiting for the warmth inside. It was 5 a.m. The world was quiet. The coffee was on. The rolls were rising. She was ready.